so many people watching YouTube at the same time. There's something different.
But even with that, it's such diminishing returns. Yeah, I know. I mean, I know they have that, but they're losing money with YouTube. I just don't know how they'll ever make it back.
Yeah, because now TikTok's like destroying YouTube because now everyone's
TikTok doesn't make money. I don't know how they make. Yeah. Nobody makes money. I don't know how things work anymore. I don't understand things. Elon Musk bought Twitter, and the best year it's ever had, it made like $5. The last year he lost like 520 some million. He's got to make $1 billion a year service on this debt to borrow to buy it. I don't understand. You know, this whole thing is built on these guys scamming bankers. Yes.
why is all these cycles
They can only grow so much. They keep growing and they keep expanding the market, and they just the ad revenues as proportion to the size keep growing. Yeah, it's just the only thing they can do is try to become a monopoly, right?
Right.
Yes.
Is it positive for that?
Probably not, because they don't make the advertisers just simply can't see any profit. They just don't see a lot of profit from the ads on it. And so what do? They energetically try to sell more of your personal data to try to get more ad revenue. It's a scary cycle. It's a really, but I just look at how do they make money? Yeah.
Why is consent
Where else would it be?
not on the map?
Valid point.
But it's not consent, Istanbul, not Constantinople.
It's a great song from the 1920s.
It's on Just Dance.
And
That is the best dance song.
because I teach other classes than
Is this for like,
Western Civ.
oh.
Yes.
The best way to prevent people from knowing your personal data is to make it so that no one wants.
I don't know.
Okay. They hoover up every bit of personal data, so don't worry about it. You can't do anything to it, they're still gonna hoover it up. It is. Yeah. And so they don't even look at it, they just. Nobody looks at it, it all goes into a formula. To sell you stuff. Moving on. Okay, so the tests. Everyone, I thought the tests were good. Good essays. Yeah, there's going to be a few things about relating it back to the essay. I mean, there's always going to be stuff, and I'm always going to ask for more material and put more stuff in it. But I thought overall the tests were good. Now, I've not graded them all yet, so I just got. When I did it, I graded chunks out of each period just because I just grabbed stacks. But I can only grade so many that I have to take a break. And so if everything goes right, I should put Hannah back on Monday, but my plan is to get him on the. Everyone looked at the same time over there. Yeah, that light's going.
It's like, no. Should just hit it.
I'm sorry for bad mouthing YouTube. Okay. The YouTube and the Google. They are media, they're the example of the monopoly. Okay, so with that, but people did well, I'll get it back to you as soon as possible. I'm pleased with it. There was, there's always going to be issues on essays, but there's nobody I read where I'm like, oh no. Okay, we're gonna have to start over from scratch. No. Huh? Okay, now, yeah. But that was somebody who just was panicking the last paragraph. I've seen the panic. I don't know what to write. Yes, I got people write down, the invention of radios too. I know you just forgot. It happens. Okay, so let's go then and talk about the last couple things here. We get to Andrew Jackson. So speaking of Andrew Jackson, urbanism. Urbanization. Did I say urbanism? That should be a word somewhere. So everyone's going to cities, that's just because that's where now, not only the factories are, but they're for commercial, the trade centers, merchants, finance. And look at 1820. So there's one town over 100,000 people. And actually, New York City was B cities then. Brooklyn, the Bronx, and New York City were separate cities. New York City's Manhattan. They wouldn't unify into one big, massive New York City until the 1880s, but they still all kind of just called it this lump of three cities, New York City. So, and you notice no cities, or Chicago was like a dock on Lake Michigan. 40 years later, gone. The entire country disappeared. It's back. Oh, whew. That was close. I also talked in massive overcrowding, but look at these cities. So the three boroughs of New York City, we're talking nearly 1 million people. Philadelphia was massive. Chicago has grown, 1,000%, and it's going to grow about 100,000 people every decade for the rest of the decade. Chicago's going to get so much bigger. That's every decade for the rest of the decade. Every decade for the rest of the century. And you notice in the South, there's really only one city. Big city. Little tiny boroughs. St. Louis really is a border. It has both northern and southern elements to this day. And population. And you notice in the north, and also massive overcrowding. And this is going to be a big issue with this new economy. If there's massive overcrowding, where are people going to live? In fact, they're going to be renting out alley spaces by the 1880s. Now, that might seem funny, that's happening now. There's such massive overcrowding, housing prices are so expensive. Hey, all it takes is one bad month. For most people, one bad month, and if you're out on the streets, what do? So they're renting out alley spaces. So, like for your tenants. It's terrible. Yeah.
Is there a lot of people in San Francisco?
Yeah, San Francisco was a boom town.
Like how they down? Agreed.
Oh, San Francisco, the fastest way to get there would be to take one of those newfangled steamboats to Nicaragua, cross at Nicaragua. Basically, your stuff being carried by donkeys, and then up here.
Where is the, can you go to that map?
Nicaragua. In fact, this was the first place I looked at a canal through the isthmus because of the lakes. It was just too wide. Right, that's the That's awesome. So, yeah, good question. Yeah, it's a long ways around. People would go overland, but that's a hard trip. Okay, so with this, so rents would be very high because you can imagine, everyone wants a place to live. They jack the rents up. If anybody has tried to look for someplace to live in Helena, for example, in the last year, it is shockingly difficult right now. It's slightly better now, meaning it's only horrific. Last year was unbelievable how bad. But same thing in towns all over it. Just we have massive overcrowding, the same thing there. And so this is going to be an issue with wages. You're leaving, you're going to look for a house. Wages. Everyone's relying upon a wage, and that means they have to have a job someplace for somebody who has the capital. And if there's a bad month and they fire you, what do? And it's not like, hey, I can go to another town. That costs a lot of money. There might be jobs in another place, but that's not an easy thing to do. So there were issues here with this overcrowding. But you'll notice too, it's in the north. And so with that, I wanted to emphasize massive. I did not do. So you wouldn't see the population density. So 1790, pretty big population here. The population spread that way very quickly. And so with that, I got to tie my shoe. You have to have these stretchy shoelaces. You feel my pain? You feel my pain with that? Stretchy shoelaces are not good. You don't want stretchy. These are words of wisdom, people. So, also, I don't know why I wrote it this way, but changing occupation, jobs were shifting dramatically. what people did. The more commercial and urban in the north meant, this is what I tried to get, look at agriculture. Almost 80% in 1820 were involved with their sole source of income, or their main source, agriculture. That's down to 53% by the Civil War. It's going to be down to 30% by the end of the decade. And or the end of the century. What is it today? Less than 1% of people make their sole income from agriculture. Virtually nobody in Montana does. You always talk about this is such an agricultural state. Very few people do make their sole income from agriculture. And you can see, so therefore, a much more diversified economy. That's one of the things about a city. That's where this diversification happens. And that's why a lot of you are probably thinking, if I'm going to have to leave after I graduate high school and get a little bit older, you're probably thinking a bigger city. You also might be thinking, then I have to go to a bigger city. I grew up in the metropolitan area of Miles City, but I did go to college in the big city, Billings. Now, when I was your age, Bozeman was about a third the population it is now, and it was kind of a cow town.
Oh, yeah,
Bozeman is like a totally different city now, totally different than it used to be. It used to be very much kind of a cowboyish town. You still see remnants downtown. It's kind of weird how things change. Helen has basically been the same. State government town, that's what it is. So, with this wave of new immigration. New immigration were coming in. Now, before the 1840s and 30s, most of the immigrants from the United States came from Britain for the most part. But after 1840s, I didn't put the date there, or 1840s, this wave of Irish and immigrants from what is now southern Germany. There was no Germany yet. So they were coming in. You can see the big percentage from Ireland and Germany. The reason why is there was a worldwide famine going on at that time. Worldwide food shortages, and the new industrialization in Germany was displacing workers. Workers who were skilled workers or farmers are being replaced by machine as industrialization in Germany. And Germany, those German kingdoms like Bavaria or Baden-Baden or even Prussia, they just kicked them out. Leave. They didn't want a bunch of poor, unemployed workers revolting. So we'll send our problems to the United States. Yeah. What caused the famine? Yeah. The potato plant. Yeah, this worldwide famine or worldwide potato is one of the most important parts of people's diets. And because potatoes grow anywhere, the problem with potatoes is they're all clones of each other, and clones gradually lose. They will lose their ability to resist fungus because clones are just weaker genetically. Potatoes are all clones. Cut the eye out, drop it in the dirt. What a weird thing to say. You cut that. Yep, obviously you cut their eyes out. You can grow, a few people grow potato from seed, but virtually no one does. They grow it from the eyes of potatoes. And, well, they're really susceptible to this fungus. And in the 1840s, the fungus was worldwide. The problem was for Ireland, unlike other places have much more diversified agriculture. So food prices are going to go up dramatically. If there's fewer potatoes, other food prices for everything else go up. But we saw that during COVID because of COVID and shipping issues. Wheat prices just skyrocketed last week. Wheat. Because about 40% of all agricultural exports around the world come from Russia and Ukraine. And so when you see that ripple to everything else, that's part of the reason we have high prices. That and gouging, that's another story. But potato, they have more diversified economy, so that would trigger revolutions all over Europe in 1840s. And the United States, there were some issues. But Ireland, England came in, brutally colonized Ireland, horrifically treated the Irish people, took the land, and they were growing wheat there. And what were they doing, these English farmers, with the wheat? Selling it back in England. So most of the Irish, virtually all Irish, had to survive on whatever they could grow on whatever scrap piece of dirt they could find, AKA potatoes. And when the blight hit in the 1840s, the worst part about the blight was, you ever seen a potato plant, that kind of a flowery, leafy plant? And yeah, and then the potatoes underground. And it just looked like this really nice plant. You have no idea until you literally dig it out if it's going to be a potato or this brown slimy sludge. Like it's just root. You had no idea. And all of a sudden, whole crops were there at once. So the English, I should say, as colonial masters of Ireland, they reacted very fast to this issue. Anybody know what they did?
Take more.
They put armed guards around the field so the Irish people, starving Irish couldn't get the crops, and put armed guards on the wagons carrying the wheat to the market, to the ship. And while people are starving in the streets. Ireland lost 40% of its population. Ireland would not reach that same population then to the 1990s. There's a very good reason that the people of Ireland despise Great Britain. A very good reason, since even though I don't have Irish in it, that's Partridge is English. I have great love for Ireland. That's why I tell people I'm from Wales, so I don't say it. But with that, and so they starved, or they gathered what pennies they could, and they got over to the Indians. And so these are different culturally. Think about how culturally different than people from England coming to the colonies to people from Ireland or southern Germany. There's language issues, religious issues, just cultural practices. It's a lot different. They started coming out. Look at, well, you can really see the wave here, can't you? Food prices stabilized. First wave of industrialization. You see another big wave in the 1870s when industrialization would start hitting Italy and Germany. Now it is Germany. And so with that, and in the United States then, wave of nativist or anti-immigrant feeling will come. We saw a little bit of this with the Alien and Sedition Act, with this wave of anti-immigrant nativists. So nativists are, what they're basically saying is that these people are not, please be in the right order, they're not real Americans. They're not real Americans. They're coming in and changing our culture with their strange ways from Ireland and Germany. They have different habits. And also this idea they're sending us, they're poor and destitute, so we now have to deal with them. Now, of course, most of these nativists, how long has their family been in the United States? Yeah, many of them were first or second generation people here. And what's a real American? Remember, before the War of 1812, if you would have said American, that was an American Indian. What is a real American? And so they're basically saying, you're not real, I'm pulling up the ladder. You can't come in. But there's a couple other things too. Jobs. They were worried now. Think about how scared there are in these new jobs, these new factories in overcrowded cities. And now here comes more people competing for the same jobs, competing for the same homes. What does that do to the price of, or what does that do to wages if you have more people competing for the same job? In the short run. Now, in the long run, immigration actually dramatically increases the market and therefore wages. New products, new goods being sold, more people to sell. But in the short run, I ain't worried about right now. Remember, in this new economy, one bad month, you can be on the street. And they're Catholics. As we all know for a fact, Catholics could never be loyal to the United States because Catholics are only loyal to the Pope. And so they said it's coming in, this enemy within that's coming in to take over the country. Oh, you'd be surprised how every single time there's a nativist issue, they keep bringing up the same argument. They just change who the target is. The same stuff that nativists say today about immigration, they say back in the 80s. It's just now different people. That's the thing about history. We can see the same stuff happening time after time. The people complaining about immigrants from Latin America, same stuff they said about the Irish. Same stuff. Which question?
I was just gonna ask.
So here, a Catholic, remember the Protestant work ethic? The Catholic, they're a bunch of drunkards who only are loyal to the Pope. So here are Germans were known for it's a different method of brewing beer called lager. So kind of a Germanic beer, lager beer, which actually would then at the turn of the next century become the most popular kind of beer. It's just kind of amazing how things cycle around and then claim that the Irish were a bunch of drunks. Now, of course, that's garbage. But what a great way to pigeonhole them and say there's something else. There's just as many people drunk or not drunk in any other group of people. Oh, so here's Native Americans beware of foreign influence. I don't know why the ends are backwards. I've been trying to figure that out. Yeah, but the first end isn't. And here's another cartoon. This would be a very common caricature. You notice how it's not quite human. The implication is that Irish aren't really real people. Eventually, it's going to have Ireland as a different race. There will be an Irish race, an Italian race, by the end of the century when racial science would begin. But you notice this horrible caricature, and there he is with a crown that's Catholic on a barrel of wine. And here, trying to protect from the immigrants, you notice they draw them as alligators. See what? You see it? You've seen the pontiff, the Pope wears a certain style. It's a hat. Yes. Yes. And as we all know, Catholics only follow the Pope. If the Pope makes one statement, everyone follows, right? The word is, of course not. But it's a great way to play. They're not really Americans. They're following someone else. They're not loyal. And this will be time after time after time. The important thing about history is it's not always the same, but it echoes time after time after time. And the same attitudes that natives had then, you hear the same. And by the way, then the next generation will say, I'm the real American, and they're not. And I was like, what about the actual first ones? Yeah.
Is that little Irish character, was that the start to like leprechauns and stuff?
No, leprechauns came before that. But it was kind of a bastardization of them. So, and I like this one. Now, this one is from Puck magazine. And it's a very common satirical magazine, very popular one up until about the 1940s. And here are people saying no to the immigrants. But the shadow of what they really were, how they started, is behind them. What were they at one time? Yeah, they too were immigrants, pulling up the ladder. I'm trying to figure out this one, but just go with it. So, a nativist political party is going to start called the American Party or the Know Nothings. It was a code word. I'll talk about it a little more later. But a nativist party. And we'll talk about it again in the 1850s. So this became a major movement, and the party almost became one of the two major parties. It almost did, the Know Nothings. And here's the point. Is this native feeling, is that more kind of conservative, either economically or that kind of nostalgia view, or liberty, or liberal, which was that idea of the individual rights in the Declaration of Independence? Don't think about conservative liberal today. People misuse all the time. I'm talking about these, the terms are just forming. Is nativism more conservative or liberal? It's kind of the definition of conservative. The idea is now that we have ours, we don't want someone coming in and changing things. We'd like to go back to the way it was before all these immigrants came in. Which go, hey, wait, you guys came in too, but our change was good. But the big thing is this very much divides, doesn't it? You're pigeonholing like some workers. Remember the Protestant work ethic and saying that temperance was good? What does that say about Catholic workers? I don't know. It divides people. It's very divisive amongst workers who are kind of have the same goal, higher wages. Now, today, this is not divisive at all. That's me lying to you. It is incredibly divisive today. Okay, we live in Montana. I don't know if you know that, but if you go to other states where there's very close elections, there's very few anymore, the way they've divided the country up. We'll talk more about that later. But there are just ads after ads about dangerous immigrant stuff. Just ad after ad to scare them. Constant. We just don't see them that much in Montana because, yeah, we're Montana. So with that, it's kind of racial, but it's class conflict. Out of this, a massive class conflict. This is also from Puck Magazine. And here it's showing the new capitalists, soon to be called robber barons. But I love how two things about it. First off, so it's like a joust between workers and owners. And here it has, look at the mighty horse, but on a locomotive. I think that's very clever for the time. And they have monopoly, the create a monopoly. And the poor worker trying to stand up to it. And what do they have? It has here democracy. And workers wore paper hats to protect their hair and from various things on the workplace. And I'm still trying to figure out what a paper hat would do. Especially like, let's say in an iron forge, but okay. So you see a lot, whenever they show workers, it being a paper hat. So one of the first real big examples of this only happened on a limited scale, but we have to mention them. We're called the Luddites. And they were these skilled craftsmen, like those who actually did the spinning of thread and had a loom at home. And they're being replaced by the machines. And so they would go in and they actually busted up these factories. And for a while, really resisted. You can imagine, though, that the militia in Britain, called territorials, were on the side of the owners. This happened a little bit in the United States, but remember, the United States had a shortage of labor. And so there wasn't as many skilled craftsmen who were losing their jobs. The bad part about this would be for the skilled craftsmen, the first ones, the ones who kept their jobs at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, by the 1880s and 1890s, when they started losing their jobs, it was too late. The system was set. And we'll see these waves of people losing their job. In the 1950s, so many people lost their jobs and were replaced by machines. They had to find something to do. One of the most famous were all the elevator operators, when also they had push buttons for the number. All these guys, men and women, lost their jobs. And it was a big, what are they going to do? Well, the economy was so dynamic then. It's not as much of a problem now, but it was a problem in the 1990s with the first big technological thing. It's not as much problem for workers because productivity. So next, yeah, I got to change that. But out of this is going to come two views of capitalism, two views. This class conflict. There are going to be people who feel left out. You notice I have a picture of an alley, people sleeping in it. This is 1890s New York. They feel left out. They feel the system is leaving them behind. That all the wealth's focusing into somebody else, they can never catch up. Or this is opportunity. I'm sorry, it's kind of blacked out. Those people believe capitalism is creating this dynamic system that is leading to new opportunity, new chances for wealth. If you show some initiative and courage and bravery, you can make it on top. So with that, two views. Who feels left out? Who feels they're in? This is great. Someday maybe I could be rich, or I'm already rich and it's wonderful. Or I'm doing well as a middle-class worker. I'm surviving, I'm doing well. So out of these two views, the people who are left out, they feel as though the system is rigged against them. Here's a cartoon from the 1860s showing this as someone on a treadmill with the promises of wealth being held out by, this is capitalism. So this is obviously someone who has a very negative feeling towards capitalism. And it shows obedience, patience. Someday you'll get it, but they'll never. We're trapped in this system. We're trapped in whatever wage we get. We can't save money. We're in debt. I can't give up my jobs. I have no place to live then. I've got to pay back my debts. We're not free people anymore. It's wage slavery. And so these people who feel left out feel it's creating wage slavery. This is exactly what Thomas Jefferson called Hamilton's view. You're going to create a bunch of wage slaves. And with that, they feared capitalism. They feared it. And So they feared they're going to lose all their power. Capitalism is creating wage slavery. I'm never going to be out of this system. I'm trapped. And the big thing is once you get a little bit of debt, wow, it's hard to give up your job, even if it's horrible, because you got to pay back that debt. And many of them begin to rally for the new political party called the Democrats, soon to be dubbed the Democratic Party. And that's Andrew Jackson. And so Andrew Jackson, he looked at this as, he saw it as his duty to protect these new workers and these farmers. Now, let's be clear about it. What he's talking about are white men, but still workers. So it's one of those things that it's a step towards including all people, but boy, is he leaving a lot behind. And they wanted to do something about it, regulated, controlled capitalism, but they really weren't sure how. All Jackson knew was that this concentration of wealth that's starting to be created is going to destroy the society. He just knew it. And the big thing Jackson really hated, before I answer that question, was inherited wealth. Just inherited wealth just drove him nuts. These rich people who had all the benefits just drove him nuts. Which question?
Oh.
Yeah, Andrew Jackson. So that was Jackson. Now, working people would go to the Democratic Party. 1840s, the issue of slavery is going to blow everything up. And then what about those people who looked at it and said, no, we are workers standing astride the entire country. I should add, the magazine is called Puck. Okay, but. Okay, all right, we're good. All right. So, workers, if you don't like your job, what can you do? Quit. Go get a different job. Or maybe someday you could become what? The capitalist. Yeah, you can own it. If you show courage and initiative, this economy is so dynamic. There's so many new opportunities. You could do it if you want. And if you don't, it's your own fault because there's so many opportunities. You're not a slave. You're free labor. Free as in you're free to make up your own choices in this wonderful dynamic system. Why? There is so much, they trusted it. And therefore, with all this opportunity, you have nothing to fear. And they would coalesce those proposing free labor around the anti-Andrew Jackson party, who called themselves the Whigs. Yeah, they literally were just, their main organizing principle was they hate democracy and they hate Andrew Jackson. And they called themselves Whigs. And they want laissez-faire economics. Sink or swim on your own merits, that's the best system, which wasn't far from what Jackson said. He just said the system is rigged, so your merit won't matter. Once again, slavery will blow up this whole thing, including the Whigs. Slavery would blow the Whigs out. Yeah.
So they were a party.
Yeah, Jackson was president when they first started.
But what did they, sure they founded themselves on
Hating democracy, represented by Jackson.
But once he was no longer president, did they just continue?
Yeah, then they started organizing themselves around free labor and big cotton plantations. Which you can see slavery will divide those two. Now, one thing, look at the names free labor and wage slavery. You wrote it down, right? Everyone look at your notes. You wrote those down, right? Wage slavery, that's not slaves. That's not the same as chattel slavery like they had for slaves in the South. Those are people who are working, they're technically free, but they feel like slaves. Everyone got that? Free labor is not labor for free, no money. Free labor is workers who are free to take all the opportunities. Why am I telling you this? Because one of you, maybe more, especially on the semester final, will write that free labor is slavery. One of you will do that. Look around, look at each other. Who's going to do it? No, don't admit it now. There'll be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Free labor are people who felt they're free to make up their own choices. Free labor is not slavery. And one of you will write that down. Just like people wrote for the 3/5 compromise, I have many people write down that gave slaves power. No! They just counted as citizens. They gave their owners power. Yeah. You gotta bring a bottle of water. You got 30 seconds. Go. Okay. All right, so workers felt very insecure, very insecure. Economies of scale was a real issue. As companies are relatively small, workers are there working with, working right side by side with their boss. But as companies got bigger, remember, there is a massive push for bigger. So you're looking at your phone for something here? Do I get a watch? No, I don't. No, you have a watch. Turn it off. Very good. Yeah, economies of scale. So, economies of scale, also you have bigger companies because everything's pushing for that. Just imagine if you work now, you go from 5 workers in a place, you know your boss, you're working, they kind of know your position, to you work with 1,000 other people. What are you now? Does your boss know you? No. Heck, your boss might not know who you are at all. You're just a person working. And let's say you go through the terrible, horrific, dangerous conditions on the workplace, and you want crazy things like slow the line down or a bathroom break. And they say, you go up with one person, you ask, how do I get better conditions? Kind of a wage, better wage. And what will your boss say? No. And if you disagree, there's 100 people out there working for jobs. But economies of scale works for workers too. Let's say not one of the 1,000 workers, but all 1,000 come in and ask for that. Give big room, honestly. But let's say let's say we demand better conditions or wages, or we all walk out together. Now the owner's like, oh, I can get rid of 1 or 2 workers. Everyone leaves at once, production shuts down. I don't make money. Economies of scale works for workers too. And what do we call that? And that's where unions come from. And here is a cartoon of workers complaining and then coming together with collective bargaining. But that's where unions started. Workers alone. You can imagine if you're an employer, you want to deal with one worker. They come in and ask, and you got it. In fact, I've worked in places like this where I had a boss. I remember this when a job I in college. I remember him telling me, I'm going to give you a special. Don't tell me. Don't tell me. I'm going to give you something. Now, I had an advantage. It was just a job I had in college, so it wasn't a job I needed afterwards. So I had a great advantage over the people that switched the job. But I found out he said the exact same thing to what other workers? Everyone. And what did he tell them all? Don't tell anybody. So then they all didn't realize how to reach. Yeah, he was kind of a scoundrel. That job I did leave and found a much better job. My summer job in college was delivering beer. And that was a fantastic job. It paid well, hard work, but it paid well. That's what I totally lucked out because I was such a good worker. So, but the growth of unions, think about the main things workers want. With the wage system, their wages could be, especially if there's more concentration, relatively low wages. They wanted higher pay. Higher pay outside of the market. So they want to get negotiated contract above the market. Better working conditions. If you have safe working conditions, it's a cost. It's a cost. Running the factory at full speed, you make more money. Yes, it's more dangerous. And yes, this is an issue today. I was just reading about Amy's. They make vegan frozen dinners and things like that. And the workers are just, it's so dangerous and so awful because all their hands are just now mush because they're burnt all the time. So they have to do something like, workers have to fold something like 15 burritos in a minute. Red hot burritos. Yes, they're trying to form a union, so Amy's just shut down the factory. Oh, they're bad workers. Which makes me sad because they're actually kind of. Moving on. Job insecurity. Hard work doesn't matter. If the company's not selling their products, they're going to lay off people. Doesn't matter how hard of a worker you are. You can be the best worker in the world. And if they got to lay off workers, they lay off workers. And that's the way it is. And this is scary. You know, one thing about a union that I'm involved in, I have relative job security. That's in fact one of the there's good things and bad things about being a teacher. And that's one of the good things. So what else? It's a biggie. Machines are more important than people. So therefore, you become nothing but somebody who operates machines and have no control over your life. I mean, think about it for a second, where you are subordinate to a machine. The capital, the technology. Yes, I know we think technology, we think computers, etc. But don't forget the steam engine was an incredible piece of technology. And what do workers want? They want collective bargaining. All together to negotiate a contract for everybody. Everybody together to negotiate. In Massachusetts, there was a state Supreme Court case about collective bargaining called Commonwealth versus Hunt. It was in Massachusetts. And the employers were trying to keep unions from organizing and say it's an illegal restriction of trade, of commerce. But the court there said collective bargaining was okay. And that's a big deal because it kind of set the precedent for other states, even though it didn't say the unions had to recognize it. Unionism is going to be really hard. More companies going to fight this. After the Civil War, no country's going to have a more violent labor struggle than the United States. Police and soldiers will commonly be used to stop strikes, shoot workers. No one had more violence than this. But here are workers on strike in a couple different places. Collective bargaining works like this. You negotiate a contract alone, you don't have much power. All together, we can negotiate a contract together. I have a negotiated collective bargaining agreement. In fact, we just renewed ours last year. As a union, we got a small raise and other couple benefits and hours. Like there's certain things that they can't make us work as working conditions after 3 4. They can't make us stay after 3 4. Now we can do it, and I do work after school. I'm not an hourly employee, but they can't say, "Oh, you got to stay till 5," or "You have to do this after school hours." Things like that. Or we get a lunch. We get a lunch. I do things during my lunch, but I don't have to. It's duty free. I have a lunch. That's a big deal. Yeah.
Sorry, I think it's funny. Like they don't force us to stay after that, but then I can go and she stays here until 7. And like, why does she become living?
Well, part of it is teachers always do put in a heck of a lot. You know, and they all I do in reality. But she also is she has extracurricular pay, so she has a different contract too. So she gets not very much. If they don't pay, you know, extracurricular like coaching and that kind of, they don't get paid very much. But she's on a different. But she also sets her own time for that. Yeah, no, she works her tail off too. And I coached for a lot of years. I know. I mean, those kind of things. It's a lot of extra time. So I have a lot of respect for football. 4 years, for many years. Then I just said, I'm done. You know, I got it done. I'm over it. So with that, the early union movement, when the first was an attempt for a workers' party called the Local Focos, they were part of the Democratic Party in upstate New York, but they never really took hold because third parties don't take hold. And I agree with you. It would be awesome to have a party named Local Foco, right?
Awesome.
Yeah, I don't care what they stand for. I'm a Local Foco. It's part of the reason why the American or Know Nothing Party. He was like, I'm a know nothing. Okay, but it was like, and they were always uncoordinated. The early union movement, the Workers' Party never took hold, and we've never had a Workers' Party. The Democratic Party was close in this era, close again in the 1930s to the 1970s, but there's never been a true working people's party. And their big issue was, are they going to fight the wage system and be anti-capitalism? Which you can imagine how the capitalists will fight back, or fight for higher wages. Or as they say, just a little bigger piece of the pie, a little better working conditions. And this was never clear. You had some of these unions that were fighting to survive, saying, hey, let's just get a little better wages and maybe a 10-hour workday instead of a 12-hour workday. And here, no, the whole system is flawed. Let's have a more worker control. They never could unify. Also, very much connected to unionism would be early socialism. And socialism too was a reaction to the Industrial Revolution. There were socialist kind of utopian movements before, but this is a new form. And this is saying, yes, we like the technology, we like the machines, but we don't like the fact that all the money is flowing to the top. And so a socialist, the main element is a classless society. No, socialists do not believe everybody should be equal, like absolutely equal. And there should be no gap between the upper and lower classes. An idealized socialist would say we're all in the same class. Oh, sure, there's different levels within the class, but not the massive divide between the very wealthy and most workers. And so that was a socialist idea. And there's all kinds of different socialists. Most are relatively moderate who wanted more like labor unions. You have workers have a greater voice. Some say let's blow the whole thing up and create something better. But a couple big elements out of it first. The workers therefore must control the means of production. And what's another name for the means of production? What's it called? Capital, yes. So the workers have more voice. So does that mean stronger labor unions, or have the government take over, or line up the capitalists and shoot them? It really depended. Now there's only a tiny minority that might say that, but you can imagine what the capitalists are going to say. Everybody's a socialist is one of these dangerous radicals. And Karl Marx would write the Communist Manifesto in 1848. No coincidence, 1848, what's happening at that time? Revolutions being triggered by the famine. All over Europe, triggered by famine. And so he's looking at like, okay, this is going to change. I'll tell you what, I have one more thing right there. We're not quite done. So with that, socialists are going to be very divided. Very divided. And so the most radical socialists want change now. The most radical socialists, who are the most radical socialists? Even more radical. Anarchists. Anarchists. No, fascists are the exact opposite way. Fascists and Nazis are the most radical pro-corporation, pro-monopoly. They're the fascists. There was a unification of finance, big business, and nationalism. Yes, the Nazis called themselves national socialists because it was also appeal to workers. Yes.
But didn't like Hitler hate communism?
Yeah, that was his mortal enemy were communists and socialists. And it worked pretty well because there was a massive totalitarian state calling themselves communists called the Soviet Union. So they can make themselves mortal enemies of each other. We must be strong and root out our enemies because of the mortal enemy next door. So, the next thing then on Monday, we mentioned Jackson. We got to do Jackson. The political. Well, I'll tell you that story. Jackson is an interesting guy. Jackson, there would be a lot of people, but he's very people are polarized about him today, even though I don't think anyone knows anything about him. But most people talk about Andrew Jackson as propaganda from his enemies. His enemies made this caricature of Jackson that people still use today. It's like, no, that wasn't Jackson. He was flawed, but name someone outside this room that isn't flawed. In this room, who's flawed? Nobody. There are no flaws. I should have the 10th grade by Monday if everything goes right.
Will they be part of our first?
If I get them graded by Monday, yes. The grades don't have to be until Tuesday afternoon.
Okay, so not part of our first.
If I get it graded, it will be part.